Thank you so much for joining me today in this conversation. I'm Shruti and I'm talking today to a very impressive young man. Welcome, Abhigyan. Thank
Thank,
you for talking to us today.
thank you so much for having me.
I'm calling you impressive at the start of our conversation before we've even exchanged a word, which is a tall order. Uh, but it's because one of the things that you've highlighted you would like to talk about today is what you call meeting the soul, which is a big one for anyone on this path. What
Right.
do you mean by meeting the soul?
I think to me, like the idea of the soul is a little different because I think it's something that's already in you, but it's just something that we haven't recognized. I think it's all about recognition at this point because soul doesn't necessarily mean something that's in the outside or something that you see or something that you can feel. To me, I think it's more about your character or your discipline. So I think once you're in tune with that part of yourself, that's what I'm calling the soul. So, say for example, you behave in a certain way, or you exercise restraint in a certain way. I think that's when that's when it's your soul who's acting up. So I don't think it's so complex a thing. I think it's pretty simple. It's just how you react to certain situations and what part of you show at that particular point of time. So I think it has more to do with your character, more to do with your attitude, more to do with your behavior than anything else. That's what I'm calling soul.
Everything you're saying is music to any parent's
Oh
ears
God.
because we all hope our children show restraint, show character, show discipline. Can you give me an example? What was your behavior like perhaps before you met the soul? Um, and what were the changes that you think that brought about?
I think, I mean, I can't think of a particular situation, but I can give you an example in terms of the fact that, for example, if there's something happening around you and you're genuinely irritated or you're frustrated, you're not liking what's happening around you. So you don't necessarily need to react at that point of time. So that's where I feel, because then the outcome just goes out of control. Because say, for example, you yell at someone, you get super angry at someone. But here, for example, when you come in tune, you come in sync with your soul and you exercise restraint, like maybe I don't really need to say something right now. I think that could be a very relevant example here where you just sort of hold back and don't necessarily add into what's happening. So that's just a small example of where I exercised restraint, or where the discipline takes over and you don't have to add into what's already happening.
Is it a calming exercise, meeting the soul? Because if I were not initiated into anything and I just read it, it actually sounds quite scary. And
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people out there think, but I don't know if I want to meet my soul. Why would I want to? It sounds larger than life. It sounds like something that I'm going to have to process, to deal with. Is it a frightening process?
I think the only reason why we might think it's frightening is because we distance ourselves from it. Because we're thinking of the soul as something else, something that's not really part of us, something that we can see outside of us, something that we have to go to connect with. I just think if we simplify it and look at it as something that we already have inside us and just have to connect with. So I think it isn't really something that it isn't a task. You know what I mean? It's not something you have to work towards. You already inherently have it in you. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, it won't be as frightening. And it's more like a part of you. Like you have this bad part of you, you have this angry part of you, you have this part of you that doesn't like certain things. Similarly, I just think your soul is a part of you that we need to acknowledge that it's a part of us. We need to be open to accepting it. And I think it's just as simple as swinging from one emotion to another. And I don't think it's as complex or as frightening as others might think of it to be.
Again, you brought out something really, really important, something that resonated with me personally. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about that because when I look back at my younger self, I think one of the things that has changed most dramatically between who I used to be and who I am is that as a younger person, often we struggle to accept part of ourselves that are not pretty. So when you are angry, or when you feel betrayed, or when you feel needy, or when you feel emotionally vulnerable, because these are not pretty things to see about oneself,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, when we were younger, spent a lot of time pushing it away. And of course, we all know how we push it away. We numb our senses, we shop, we drink, we
Right.
indulge in excessive behavior of any sort,
Right.
whatever it is that helps to numb that. And it's
Right.
that's almost a characteristic of youth,
Yeah.
because you
Correct.
struggle with those parts of yourself that are difficult to accept. And so to hear someone as young as you saying that they see the good and the bad in themselves is really, really telling. Do you feel that there was a process by which you first learned to see the good and the bad, and then to accept the good, the bad, the ugly without going through this diversion that so many of us take?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you rightly pointed out, it's all about recognizing, because I think at some point we don't even recognize the. Sometimes we don't recognize the good, sometimes we don't recognize the bad. As long as you're aware that I have this in me, I don't think it's wrong to not want certain bad parts, and you want to like want them to just go away, or try to even occasionally move towards other things to try to forget these feelings. I think all of that is okay, but what is not okay is to not acknowledge that I have this and not be aware of it, which is precisely what Tarani does through her process, is where she tells you what it is, where it's coming from, where it's stemming from, what its root is. And I think the more you become aware of these points, it doesn't bother you as much, because now I know that this insecurity is stems from this point. So now that you're aware, it just becomes less problematic, and it doesn't take a toll on you like it might have. So I think what Tani helps you really understand is where it's coming from, what's the cause, what's its impact, either at a conscious level or at a subconscious level. Because your insecurity could be, like I have a double chin, for example. So you, it's not wrong to have that insecurity, and there's nothing bad about it. But it's important to understand why I feel insecure about it and what I can do to not let that feeling overpower. So I think um, once you address these issues with Tarni, it just really helps you not be affected by them as much.
I'm sure you won't be surprised to know that you're not alone, particularly within your age group. Uh, People are more vulnerable to endless scrutiny of physical characteristics. And so much
Right.
of our self esteem is based on that. And we
Right.
feel that it marks us for
Yeah.
life. So
Yeah.
if you don't fit into a certain mold, then you are forever going to be whatever the end of that sentence is. And so it's fascinating that you feel you've been able to allay those fears.
Yeah.
Uh, and you sound fairly confident about where you are today.
I mean, I think in terms of physical appearance, I think our times have changed. We're not as aggressive as we used to be. I'm sure there are people that do look beyond. But having said that, yes, it's it's okay to feel a certain way about how you look, or how you don't look. But it's more about, oh, what can I do with what I have? This is not something that I can just wish away, or not something that's just going to go away magically. And that's not what we're looking for either in this process. It's more about, I have it, what can I do best with it? Why do I have to always look at it in negative light? Why should I even look at it as something that's bad? Maybe it's too small a thing to consider bad, and too irrelevant a thing to consider bad, because there's so many more things that are important in today's times, right?
Sort of
And
is from the outside, because when you brought it up, I had to lean into the screen and stare even closer and try and figure out what you were talking about. So it sort of is, but it's that doesn't help you at all. It's irrelevant to the outside world.
correct.
Sure, it is a big deal in your mind.
Right, of course, no doubt about that.
Has this also changed the way that you are looking then at other people? Because one of the other things about being as young as you are is that you tend to view the world differently. It's a slightly more superficial view of the world. We tend to take people um, on appearance more than on depth.
For
Uh,
sure.
if you've had this sort of revelation about yourself, where you are more than the sum total of your parts, does that also change the way that you are looking at other people?
For sure. I mean, definitely. I think um, the way you think and your thought process definitely reflects outward. And what I mean by that is, if you feel a certain way about something about yourself, you probably won't impose that upon another when you know it might make them feel uncomfortable. So I think that level of self-awareness is established. That's just like basic. But I think um yeah, I think being more considerate, being more compassionate, being more open to what the other's trying to say, being a better listener, these are things that that do become evident if you think a certain way and if you're not bogged down by, say, for example, the way you look. So I think it does come out into the open, but I think it's more subtle. It's not direct. Like you might just hold back at some place and not say something to someone, or you might show compassion in a very. I think it's more subtle. Yeah, I think it's more subtle.
Would you choose people differently? Would you choose your peer group or your friends or someone that you might even be romantically involved with differently, using different criteria, i.e., not uh, the criteria that you would have used perhaps, or you would have thought of using, or the ones that you read about in books or see in movies? Has your criteria for what you want in a person that you let into your space changed?
No, not really. I think I would be really open to looking at everything, whether it's companionship or anything else, because having a criteria and looking for something specifically is a very, I think it's a little egoistic, because I'm like, I want only this, or this person to look only like this, or the person I should be with should look like this. I think it's coming from a place of ego. That's what I feel. Or it's more like, okay, I'm inferior and I get to decide what my future, whatever is going to look like. So I see it as something stemming from ego, but then again, of course, there's a part of you that wants certain things, but I won't let it overpower me being open. Like, I'm open to what you have to say. I might disagree with it, but I will listen. Um, yeah, I think I would be open in terms of finding a friend or whatever. I don't think I have a fixed criteria of what that person should be.
What
I hope
about
that
you?
answered your question, though.
Yes, completely. I'm writing out a post on shadi.com as we speak.
Oh God.
How has this affected your interactions with your peer group? Because I'm assuming that not all of the people that you hang out with that are your age are talking about meeting the soul or going on a path of self-discovery. I'm sure there's regular conversations about where do you want to go on a Friday night. Um, and do you find yourself slightly distant from that? Do you feel that you still can go out and have fun and fit in with that peer group? What's that experience like for you?
Okay, before I answer that question, I just want to make it very clear I'm as normal as anyone. There's nothing great or cool about me. And I don't differentiate myself from people I hang out with or people I don't hang out with. I think I'm very, very normal. But yeah, just to go back to your question, um, of course, I mean, you do see through things that are really mundane and really don't add too much to what you want to do. Say, for example, um, certain conversations are just small talk, but then if the conversation is only small talk, then you know that there's something missing or there's a link that's missing. So definitely it changes the interactions that you have with people around you, but I don't think that it's a defining factor. Like, only if we have these kind of conversations can we hang out for a drink, for example. So I don't limit myself, but I can identify. I'm aware when it's going downhill and when the conversation is just very superficial. I can tell, and I will distance myself, but I won't be mean about it. It's important.
A lot of times when I speak with young people, they buy into the idea of getting to know themselves better. They buy into the idea of self acceptance, self love, self discovery, but they feel it's not for them right now. And they push it out to, 20 years later, I'll come to this and I'll explore this then. But it's not for me now. And when I push and ask why it's not for them now, I find more often than not they don't want to change, because this is a period in their life when they're engaging so intensely with the outside world that they think anything that is to do with the self will take them away from their friends, their social life, their career. Often they say, no, no, this is not the time for me to meditate. This is the time for me to study. This is the time for me to focus. This is the time for me to widen my perspective. What would be your advice to someone like that? Someone who's young, someone who has ambition in terms of their personal life, their career, and they just feel that this journey of the self doesn't fit into that list that I have for the next few years for myself.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm in any place to give advice, but I will definitely answer your question. I think if we look at self-discovery or getting in sync with yourself as something that's complementary to your career or to your relationship or to your education, and not so much as something that is going to wear you out or something different. I think it's something that goes hand in hand. You discovering your own potential is more often than not going to make you a better student, going to make you a better corporate. I just think if we're able to link the two things and say that they're part of the same process, then it'll work better. You know, where you're saying me getting to know what I really am. Say, for example, you're alone for 5 minutes. There's no distraction. There's no social media. There's nothing. You're just alone for 5 minutes, and you understanding a certain thing about yourself is probably going to help you at university. It's probably going to help you when your boss asks you something. So I think it's going to help to do it now when you're younger than push it forward to when you're older, because the more self-aware you are, the better you react to situation, the more the outcome is in your control and not someone else controlling it. Because I know this about myself, I know X or Y about myself, and I know what outcome it can possibly have. So both ways, I think it works in your favor. You have to and it's, I don't think it's a task. Maybe the whole concept of it being a task, self-discovery, understanding the self, I really don't think it's something that requires um, um, a lot of hard work. I think it's something that comes to you easily. We're just talking about basic stuff. The stuff that comes up in our sessions with Tarini is not something that can't be understood. It's not something that you need to work upon for hours or months together. Um, I just think we should look at it as something that is in line with your career or with your education, not as something that you should achieve later on when you're older. It's just going to help you at this point.
Do you have an example, perhaps, of how being on this path of self awareness helped you with an academic choice, for example?
Yeah, I would be more than happy to share this experience of how about 4 years ago, 4 5 years ago, when I wanted to I had to go to university and I had to choose between two places. I did ask Tarani for help, and she rightly guided me and and suggested a certain university that I must attend, and I think it really helped me because. Um, I felt it was the right thing for me. The course was new. It was almost like as if it was tailor made just for me, and I could relate with what the course had to offer. So I think if you look at things before and work on them before and try to understand why is this a better option or why is that not a better option, or I think if you analyze a bit before making big decisions, it really adds up, right? Because then, like for example, with me at university, I really felt like I belonged there. You know, things I did really interested me. The assignments were super interesting. The people I met are my friends for life. So I just think that this whole activity of identifying the university I had to go to really helped me become the person I am. Because those are the formative years when you're, say, 17, 18, all the way up to 2021. It really matters who you're with, what you're learning, what you're doing with your time. So I think it really shapes the person you are. So I am, if I may say, really grateful to this process for having pointed me in the right direction in terms of the university I went to.
That you can even recognize that now, because most of us recognize the impact of our decisions, good or bad, uh, when it's a bit late to then go back and correct them. And especially university, it's such an important choice. As you said, it affects so much of your life to come that it's hard to overstate getting that choice right. And I know that I know I didn't. I know I was, where you were a few years ago and had a choice between different universities. And I think my criteria and how I picked a university to go to was completely off. And I picked on the basis of where's going to be more fun, where are my friends going, where's going to be easier, where is a less academic university, rather than going, I didn't look at the universities that accepted me and said, okay, this is top drawer. I'll go to the best one that accepted me. I went to the one that would be most fun and least work for me. And it's definitely something that I have then lived to regret. So I think what you said about having that pause, that time to reflect on your choices and really question the reason, when you know yourself
Yeah,
as well as you clearly do, you're able to pinpoint why you're making a certain choice and identify a red flag. Whereas I feel I hurtled through a very important decision in my life and I just made it
right.
without asking myself that is this really what I want to do? It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Do I want to go to the place that's most fun, or do I want to go to the place that's going to be the most rewarding?
Yeah,
And I think that's a choice that a lot of people will identify with, because you're saying this today about a university, but I think the same can be said about life choices like a job or where
yeah,
you're going to live. What is the criteria that you're going to use to choose it? So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is that your decision making is enhanced because your knowledge of yourself is enhanced. You know
absolutely.
yourself better, so you
Correct,
know what decisions are going to work for you.
correct,
And when you're making the wrong one, you also know why you're making the wrong one. So if
correct.
you were going to choose a university because it's going to be a good party, you would be able to sell that that's the wrong reason for
But,
choosing it.
but then again, right, that's what this is about, where we're not going to judge someone for a choice they made for a certain reason. It's more about, I mean, everyone has their own way of realizing, and it takes a certain amount of time for different people, and there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, I think it's less about um, judging another because of why they went to a university or why they didn't go to university. I think it's more about everyone is just going to take their own time, and it really doesn't matter as long as you're getting there and you're in the right direction. It really shouldn't matter. I know I went off topic, but I just wanted to say that it's not about criticizing or judging someone because of a certain choice they made. I mean, everyone can get to the same place. The time really doesn't matter as long as your intent is right, and um, your intent is pure. Like, I'm doing this for a certain reason, then it shouldn't matter.
We've spoken thus far about very positive things, about tempering your reactions, about moderation, about knowing yourself, about self awareness, about making decisions in the right way, using the right criteria. But being young is about a lot more than that. There's a certain angst, a certain anxiety that invariably accompanies being young. And I find more and more when I look around, I find younger people struggling with quite serious issues. It's not all fun and games. They're grappling with a fair amount of existential angst. And again, some fare better than others at dealing with these issues. Some are unfortunately depressed or struggling. Has that been your experience? Has there been phases of that? Has it been all sunshine, or has there been slight clouds along the way as well?
No, definitely not. I think there were definitely moments, and there still are moments, where I find myself um, facing just this perpetual sadness and this pittish feeling in my stomach, which is pretty similar to what depression is like. But what I think, as long as it's in phases and you're able to identify that this is what I'm feeling at this point of time, and the impact could be X, Y, Z, then its effect isn't like the magnitude with which you feel those emotions isn't that strong. I think definitely it's not just people my age, it's people older and people younger who are facing these issues. But I think as long as you don't deny them, I think it's a lot to do with people denying what they're feeling, or not sharing it with another person, which I feel is a mistake. But that denial is, I feel, is a bigger problem than the sadness or the loneliness or the depression itself. Because if you're going to deny what you're feeling, it's just going to get heavier, and you're going to feel it with even more intensity, and it's just not going to work for you. I think if you acknowledge that, okay, I do feel this way, and sometimes it's not really all that good, then already the intensity has reduced and you don't feel all that bad. And moreover, if you're able to identify where it's coming from, which is precisely what Tani helps you do, like, why am I feeling this? And what is the impact it's having on me? And what can I potentially do to reduce the effect? If you have a very organized, chronological, stepwise way to look at it, I think it really does help. It Those moments won't go away. They definitely will be there, but you'll know how to deal with them. And you will never let them overpower you. Like, you feeling sad in a moment where everyone else is happy. You know, I think you inherently will know how to deal with it. You won't like break down and, you know, react in a certain way. I think your the way you respond to it will be more controlled. And you'll have control over the emotion, and it won't have control over you.
So, two thoughts as I'm hearing you say what you're saying. One is that uh, I stand corrected, and you're absolutely right. Mental health is something that everyone struggles with. And I find the culture around it is one of such silence. The truth is that you and I statistically are more likely to suffer from depression than we are to be hit by a bus as we're crossing the road.
For
And
sure.
yet, every single time we cross the road, we'll make sure we look left and right. But every morning that we wake up, we won't do a mental health check with ourselves. We won't say, how am I feeling today? Am I going to be able to cope, or do I need to reach out for help? It would never occur to you. And if you said this to somebody, if we brought up our children, just like we teach them to cross a road and say, look left, look right, look again, then you cross. If we brought them to sort of grow up and just check in with themselves, you've called it seeing yourself, to check in with yourself, to have that conversation with yourself and say, are you able to cope? Are you not able to cope? What do you need in order to be able to cope? We'd go a long way.
For
I
sure.
think we'd go further than just sort of doling out Prozac or Xanax or
For
prescription
sure.
drugs to people. This is a longer term cure.
Yeah.
But
Sorry, no,
but
I just want to say, sorry, I just want to say it has also has more to do with the stigma, right? Like you said, it's not something people talk about. It's not something people want to talk about. So as long as you're able to overlook and overpower the stigma, you're already on the right path. You're talking about it. You're sharing what you feel, and it's only then that you can possibly find solutions. Because if it's in you, then it's just your mind controlling, and it's just your thoughts and emotions that overpower. I think it's very important to speak up. It's very important to share, and I just think it's super stigmatized, and that's where the issue lies.
it is, because we have this mental image of what someone who is depressed should look like. And
Correct.
so I feel that, maybe if I say I'm depressed, you're going to think, oh, what a loser.
Yeah.
Perhaps something hasn't worked out on the personal front or the career front, but the real picture is that people with everything um, are more likely to be
Correct.
depressed than someone who doesn't have the space and the time and the luxury in their
Yeah.
life to be
Yeah.
depressed. It just has to show up
Yeah.
for life. So I think you're right. Along with talking about it, it's important to see different sorts of people talking about it.
Correct.
And it could be a young person, it
Yeah.
could be an older person, it could
Yeah.
be a healthy person, it could be a rich person, it could be a poor
Yeah.
person, a single person, someone with a
Correct.
family. All of us
Yeah.
really could at some point or the other be depressed.
For sure. I
And what
mean,
are the tools you thought that helped you dealing with what you call this sadness? And if you feel comfortable talking about it, then tell us a little bit of where you mapped it to. What was causing the sadness? Because again, when I look at you, I see someone at the cusp of their life, such opportunity. You went to one of the best universities in the field that you want to be with. So how were you able to understand the genesis of this sadness?
yeah. So I think the way in which this process really helped me was to identify that somewhere it was self-generated. So if you're trying to ask me where the root of it was, or where this sadness or depression was stemming from, I felt what I was able to see was that it was self-generated. There is a part of you that is addicted to the feeling itself. It's like two polarities. Either you're in that euphoric state where it's all fun and games, and you're having the best time of your life, and then this is the other polarity where you're on this all-time low. So I think the idea and the solution here would be to find a midpoint, is to not constantly swing between these two polarities. So going back to your question, it was self-generated because you also want the high, but you don't really want to face this low. So I think living in a more balanced way where you're not looking for the high, and it's not what really satisfies you and serves your purpose, is the solution. Where I'm not like, okay, I need to feel that, but I don't want to feel this. And the idea is just to have a more balanced, sustained existence, where I'm okay to compromise on certain things, where I'm okay to compromise is the wrong word. I'm okay to not indulge in certain things and have a more sustained existence where you choose the mid paths, and you're like, okay, this is, I'm not going to swing between these two, because if I feel this, then I will definitely feel the other end. So yeah, I think the solution was more towards the mid path, yeah.
I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, because when you're talking about this high, I think a lot of the problems people have today come from constantly chasing that high or trying to sustain that high. And it can be anything, right? Like I said, it can be an out of balance reaction to anything, uh, whether it's a substance or it's a habit. I mean, food is a substance when it's abused. So do you think this is something that would apply to a lot of people, not just you, this need to sort of chase that high to the detriment of your larger self?
For sure, absolutely. I think it's not meant just for a certain age group or for a certain kind of people. I think it's universal, and it applies to each and every one. And I think as long as that urge or that desire to want that high is absent, then you won't really feel that low. Because the thing is, I think what I'm just going to bring in another point that I really wanted to say even before was, I think it's important to understand that this process that Tani takes you through is very scientific. Like, we're talking about the mind, we're talking about thoughts, we're talking about the forms they take, what they manifest into, how a certain thought you have will eventually be a certain outcome, and it will take form. So I think the moment we understand how our thoughts or how our emotions literally affect our life, then we won't go around searching for a high or for a low, because it's literally shaping your life. Things we say, things we do, things we think about, things we feel, for sure have an impact. And it's not something that we can ignore. So I think if that becomes clear, then it's reason enough to not look for that high, or then to even not be addicted to the low. Because sometimes I feel it's also, you're addicted to both. You're addicted to feeling sad because then you become the victim, and then everyone gives you empathy and pity. And yeah, so I think it's more about realizing how important thoughts and feelings are and not taking them for granted.
I think it's telling that Tarani is called her institute my institute, because you
Yeah,
think of the path to self-discovery not involving the mind at all,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And people tend to categorize themselves in two different lots. I'm a very cerebral person,
yeah.
so I'm not into any of this, and you are maybe more of a emotional, right brain motivated person, and this is for you. Whereas the truth is, like you said, the mind is the most powerful tool that we
Yeah.
have at our disposal. And
Right.
perhaps we discount how much of that is involved in how our body functions, even in how our life plays out.
For sure. Yeah.
But you referred earlier to discipline, to living a life of balance. What does that mean? What does discipline or living a life of balance mean? How did this awareness that you got perhaps through this process manifest into a life of balance for you?
I think it has a lot to do with knowing when to say no. And what I mean by that is, say, it could be your eating habits, it could be your behavior, it could be anything. I think when you know that here's where I draw the line, and here's where I, practice restraint and step behind and don't necessarily indulge, I think that's the mid path. And that's what it is to have discipline where you know that, this is something that I would otherwise have liked to do, but it's just going to cause me harm eventually, so I say no. you know it's all about practicing restraint, like I keep saying, and it's all about saying no at the right time. Like when you know something is ethically wrong, and something, no matter what your urges are, no matter what your desire is, if you know something is ethically wrong, and say for example will cause harm to another or will make someone feel bad, you just tell yourself, no, I'm not going to do this. And that's where discipline comes in, and that's where I think, it's more balanced, and that's where your life is balanced, because then you know. I mean, it just sounds very simple that it's good from bad and right from wrong, but at that moment when your urges take over, to then practice restraint is the most difficult, I feel. And yeah, for sure, I definitely feel that discipline has a lot to do with saying no and practicing restraint.
No, absolutely. I mean, what you say is a universal truth. It's almost always easier to say yes to an impulse than to actually say no to it. That requires a certain amount of, as you say, self-awareness, self-restraint, and discipline to be able to look at something and reject it as an option. Which are some of the areas that you think in your life have come into balance? Where do you feel this balance?
I definitely feel it in terms of my health. I mean, this process has taught me how to balance, say for example, um, your personal life with your work life, with how your health needs to be. I think I definitely have, like, my eating habits and my exercise habits have become more streamlined, for sure. I see a lot of behavioral changes, where I would react in a certain way, when in a certain situation I would react in a certain way, but now I feel like I know how I should or should not react in that moment. And I definitely feel like I have more control over my emotions, where they don't overpower me all the time, and I don't necessarily get involved too much. I mean, it's good in certain cases to go all out and feel your emotions and cleanse yourself, but at times it might not always be the right thing to do. So yeah, these are few of the places. Definitely, my having a healthier lifestyle, not indulging in and reacting when a certain situation is there, and yeah, and having greater control over my emotions. These three things.
What would you say, because you brought up career, you brought up education, what would you say to somebody your age, in your place, who says, I just don't have the time for this? I need to focus on my career. I need to focus on getting good grades. I need to focus on getting into the right university. And it's not just the younger person, it's often parents I speak with as well, who are quite firm. Well, this is not the time in his or her life to do this. He really needs to focus on his grades now. Or he and there's resistance even within the parent community. A lot of schools want to talk about mindfulness workshops, meditations, and the parents say, well, this is not why I'm paying you a fee. I don't need you to take my child and teach them how to sit quietly for 15 minutes. I need you to make my child president of the debating society.
Yeah.
So how did you overcome that? And did you not feel the pressure of, well, I need to focus on my grades, I need to focus on university, I need to focus on getting a great job? Or did you feel that actually both of these paths are aligned?
Well, I think it's all about prioritizing. If you're able to prioritize what you have to do, um, then everything gets done. I mean, I don't think there's ever a question of, do I have enough time? If you want to do it and if you prioritize correctly, you definitely will make time to do it. I think the reason why people might think so, where they say, I don't necessarily have the time, and why would I want my kid to, sit, just pay money to have him sit quietly? because I think the gravity of the situation is not understood. Why aren't we looking at it from another angle? Maybe that kid sitting for 15 minutes teaches him something about himself, which will make him a happier person. For example, it's as simple as that. So, would you want your kid to have a better job and earn more money, or just be happier? I mean, it sounds very simple, but um, I think if you prioritize correctly and if you're less resistant, as you said, that people do tend to be very resistant. If you prioritize correctly, you definitely will have time to meditate in this case. But um, yeah, I think it's important um, to understand how effective all of this can be in your life, and it will only add to what you're doing. It will only add to your education. It will only add to you being a parent. It will only add to your career. It'll just make you better. So if something is available and it's um, going to enhance what you're already doing, I don't understand why people would be resistant to it. Yeah.
What has it added? If meditation is a toolbox, what's the tool that you feel it's given you? For me, I know my number one benefit or advantage is that if I've meditated before a certain event, it's given me perspective, which is not to say that I've always acted or reacted in the right manner, but even when I've reacted wrongly to a situation, I've had the perspective where it's almost as if I'm seeing myself in the third person and I'm saying, wow, Shruti, you're really overreacting to this situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or um, I'll watch myself and I'll say, okay, this is clearly something in you has gotten triggered,
Yeah.
or you are making an impulsive decision, or you're making a greedy decision. I can see, I might not always be able to stop myself from acting in a certain way, but I can certainly see it play out. So there's this complete awareness. Even when I am being short or snappy or mean or angry or unkind to a person, I might still on occasion be unkind to a person, but there's no hiding from myself.
Yeah.
And when I
Yeah.
sit with myself, I can see very clearly that, wow, you were really uncharitable in that situation, or you were really unkind in that situation. What is it that it's done for you? If I had to ask you, what has meditation brought to your life? What would you say?
I don't think it's done something much different from what you said. I think it's brought a lot of, like you said, perspective. I'm just saying clarity. There's a lot more clarity of thought. There's a lot more clarity in terms of what I want. You also become clear of another's intent. I feel like there's this, once you meditate and give yourself those few minutes to just sit and understand and breathe, just breathing, I think it gives you that ability to see through yourself and to see through another. So clarity of your own thoughts and clarity of your own intent, but also of another. I often find myself in a situation where, like, I can tell what the other person is thinking, or I can tell what his or her intent might be. I'm not calling this a superpower or anything. This is something that any of us can do. Just FYI. I just feel like certain gestures or certain expressions which you might have ignored otherwise become clear. So to me, meditation just makes things clearer. And also, like I have literally said in every line, it helps me step back from situations and sort of practice restraint, because I feel like I have the habit of just jumping in and saying something in the spur of the moment. But I think it really helps me not get involved, one, and definitely clarity of thought and clarity of what's happening around me. I feel I'm more aware of um, what is being said by me, what is being said by another, how that could possibly affect all of us. um, yeah, just being more in the moment and being more aware and clear. That's what it does for me.
What does your practice look like? Because you spoke about the fact that really one just needs a few minutes of quiet. And that, again, is another misconception about meditation, that you're going to have to get up at 4 a.m. and sit in absolute silence and in absolute darkness, away from the world, away from any sound, and spend hours in this state. And that perhaps is one method, and that perhaps is how some people do it. But what is your own meditation practice like, and how seamlessly does it fit into the rest of your life?
To be very honest, it's just a few minutes of your day. It's You don't even have to be in a certain place. It's just you. I mean, what the key to meditating is just being with yourself, whether you're with yourself in a room or not in a room, or whether there's someone with you. Even I think it's more about just closing your eyes and sort of understanding what you're feeling on the inside. Of course, initially there will be thoughts that come in, mundane things like, oh, I have this to do, or I have this to submit, or my kid's waiting for me at home, I have to pick him up. So these thoughts will definitely come in, because then again, we're still just human beings. But there is a moment in your entire meditation process where you're connecting with your soul, you're connecting with your higher self, you're connecting with a part of you that you're not necessarily familiar with. And that's what you're actually looking for, and that's the reason you do it. I mean, there are, say, out of 10 minutes, 6 minutes are just thoughts, things you have to do, things that are worrying you. But then there are just 4 minutes which is all about you, where you're trying to understand who you are, you're trying to understand yourself better. You're coming in sync with a part of yourself that you're not aware of completely. So the idea of it is that those 4 minutes. But um yeah, I don't think there's any conditioning that it needs to be in a certain place at a certain time. Definitely not. It's as per your convenience. In the end, it has to do with you. And when you find time, or even if you don't find time, even doing it every alternate day is not a bad thing. I just don't see it as a task or something that needs to be achieved or something that has to be done. Um, like brushing your teeth is not something that you would call a task. It's just something you have to do for oral hygiene. So I just think that the moment we don't look at it as a task, it becomes easier to do. And we're not like propagating it that everyone needs to meditate. It's just better if you do.
I think that's a fabulous message. So it's also reminded me as well that really all the excuses that we come up with in order to not meditate that day, but you manage to sort of brush your teeth, bathe yourself, clothe yourself, and get out of bed. So why was
Right,
meditation not part of that sanity check?
right, right. And
That's
for
a
those
great.
who, so, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but for those who don't think um, in the same way and don't necessarily feel like it's the right thing, that's okay too. I mean, to each their own. It's all
But
about.
often there isn't the black and white. I find that there's in all of us such a resistance to meditate,
Yeah,
even though intellectually we're all convinced of the benefits.
yeah, yeah,
There's so many studies out there
yeah,
on the impact of meditation on everything
yeah,
from, as we discussed already, mental health,
yeah,
but also on your physical health, also on the quality of life that you're living, on the quality of work that you're producing, on your efficiency, and pretty much every metric has been measured, and meditation has been shown to have an impact on all, and we know that
yeah,
intellectually.
yeah,
But of course, all of us on different days have different resistances. And I don't know whether this has been your experience, but there's sometimes when you cannot wait to go to your room, sit quietly, and meditate. And there are other days when you've got 2 hours free and you think, wow, this is the
yeah,
time to do it. But you're so busy scrolling Instagram
for
or
sure.
shopping online or whatever it is that you do. And I feel like even when I speak with friends who say I don't have the time, or when I myself say I'm so busy this week, I have no time for it, I realize that actually that's when I need it the most.
Yeah,
And all it really takes is a few minutes.
yeah. I mean, if it's not something that you consider important, then naturally you wouldn't have time for it. But if it's something that, if you feel spending time to yourself and giving yourself more importance than a meeting that might eventually lead to nothing, then that's your choice. You know what I mean? It all comes down to what you want. In the end, everyone has a choice to do what they want, and no one can take that away from you. And I wouldn't say it's wrong not to meditate. I would just say it's better if you do. I mean, in the end, what might be good for someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be good for everyone. So I just think it all comes down to the choice point. Do I want to do this? Do I choose to do this? Yeah. So to each their own, I guess.
Well, it's great to see you make such really, really good choices and this early in your life. Thanks so much for the conversation
Thank
today, for this
you.
more
Thank you so much.
information. on meditating, on the method, on Tharani's Mind Institute, on the Mind Institute website. So feel free to have a look and spend some time on it in case you need other questions that need answering. Thanks a lot, Abigail.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.